inflames my blood and intoxicates all my senses." I held her close to me, and clung for several moments to her moist lips. "Oh, you beautiful woman!" I then exclaimed, looking at her. In my enthusiasm I tore the sable from her shoulders and pressed my mouth against her neck. "You love me, even when I am cruel?" said Wanda. "Now go! You bore me, don't you hear?" She boxed my ears so that I saw stars, and bells rang in my ears. "Help me into my furs, slave." I helped her, as well as I could. "How awkward!" she exclaimed, and was scarcely in it before she struck me in the face again. I felt myself growing pale. "Did I hurt you?" she asked, softly touching me with her hand. "No, no!" I exclaimed. "At any rate, you have no reason to complain. You wanted this. Now kiss me again." I threw my arms about her, and her lips clung closely to mine. As she lay against my breast in her large heavy furs, I had a curiously oppressive sensation. It was as if a wild beast, a she bear, were embracing me. It seemed as if I were about to feel her claws in my flesh. But this time the she bear let me off easily. With my heart filled with smiling hopes, I went up to my miserable servant's room and threw myself down on my hard couch. Life is really amazingly droll, I thought. A short time ago the most beautiful woman, Venus herself, rested against your breast, and now you have an opportunity for studying the Chinese hell. Unlike us, they don't hurl the damned into flames, but they have devils chasing them out into fields of ice. Very likely the founders of their religion also slept in unheated rooms. During the night I startled out of my sleep with a scream. I had been dreaming of an ice field in which I had lost my way. I had been looking in vain for a way out. Suddenly an Eskimo drove up in a sleigh harnessed with reindeer. He had the face of the waiter who had shown me to the unheated room. "What are you looking for here, my dear sir?" he exclaimed. "This is the North Pole." A moment later he had disappeared, and Wanda flew over the smooth ice on tiny skates. Her white satin skirt fluttered and crackled. The ermine of her jacket and cap, but especially her face, gleamed whiter than the snow. She shot towards me, enclosed me in her arms, and began to kiss me. Suddenly I felt my blood running warm down my side. "What are you doing?" I asked, horror stricken. She laughed, and as I looked at her now, it was no longer Wanda, but a huge white she bear who was digging her paws into my body. I cried out in despair, and still heard her diabolical laughter when I awoke and looked about the room in surprise. Early in the morning I stood at Wanda's door, and the waiter brought the coffee. I took it from him and served it to my beautiful mistress. She had already dressed and looked magnificent, all fresh and roseate. She smiled graciously at me and called me back when I was about to withdraw respectfully. "Come, Gregor, have your breakfast quickly too," she said. "Then we will go house hunting. I don't want to stay in the hotel any longer than I have to. It is very embarrassing here. If I chat with you for more than a minute, people will immediately say, 'The fair Russian is having an affair with her servant.' You see, the race of Catherines isn't extinct yet." Half an hour later we went out. Wanda was in her cloth gown with the Russian cap, and I in my Cracovia costume. We created quite a stir. I walked about 10 paces behind, looking very solemn, but expected momentarily to have to break out into loud laughter. There was scarcely a street in which one or the other of the attractive houses did not bear the sign "Camere Ammobiliate." Wanda always sent me upstairs, and only when the apartment seemed to answer her requirements did she herself ascend. By noon I was as tired as a stag hound after the hunt. We entered a new house, and left it again without having found a suitable habitation. Wanda was already somewhat out of humor. Suddenly she said to me, "Severin, the seriousness with which you play your part is charming, and the restrictions which we have placed upon each other are really annoying me. I can't stand it any longer. I do love you. I must kiss you. Let's go into one of the houses." "But, my lady," I interposed, "Gregor?" She entered the next open corridor and descended a few steps of the dark stairway. Then she threw her arms about me with passionate tenderness and kissed me. "Oh, Severin, you were very wise. You are much more dangerous as a slave than I would have imagined. You are positively irresistible, and I am afraid I shall have to fall in love with you again." "Don't you love me any longer, then?" I asked, seized by a sudden fright. She solemnly shook my hand, but kissed me again with her swelling, adorable lips. We returned to the hotel. Wanda had luncheon, and ordered me also quickly to get something to eat. Of course, I wasn't served as quickly as she, and so it happened that just as I was carrying the second bite of my steak to my mouth, the waiter entered and called out with his theatrical gesture, "Madame wants you, at once." I took a rapid and painful leave of my food, and, tired and hungry, hurried toward Wanda, who was already on the street. "I wouldn't have imagined you could be so cruel," I said reproachfully. "With all these fatiguing duties, you don't even leave me time to eat in peace." Wanda laughed gaily. "I thought you had finished," she said. "But never mind. Man was born to suffer, and you in particular. The martyrs didn't have any beefsteaks either." I followed her resentfully, gnawing at my hunger. "I have given up the idea of finding a place in the city," Wanda continued. "It will be difficult to find an entire floor which is shut off and where you can do as you please. In such a strange, mad relationship as ours there must be no jarring note. I shall rent an entire villa, and you will be surprised. You have my permission now to satisfy your hunger, and look about a bit in Florence. I won't be home till evening. If I need you then, I will have you called." I looked at the Duomo, the Palazzo Vecchio, the Loggia di Lanzi, and then I stood for a long time on the banks of the Arno. Again and again I let my eyes rest on the magnificent ancient Florence, whose round cupolas and towers were drawn in soft lines against the blue cloudless sky. I watched its splendid bridges beneath whose wide arches the lively waves of the beautiful yellow river ran, and the green hills which surrounded the city, bearing slender cypresses and extensive buildings, palaces and monasteries. It was a different world, this one in which we are, a gay sensuous smiling world. The landscape, too, has nothing of the seriousness and sombreness of ours. It is a long way off to the last white villas scattered among the pale green of the mountains, and yet there isn't a spot that isn't bright with sunlight. The people are less serious than we. Perhaps they think less, but they all look as though they were happy. It is also maintained that death is easier in the south. I have a vague feeling now that such a thing as beauty without thorn and love of the senses without torment does exist. Wanda has discovered a delightful little villa and rented it for the winter. It is situated on a charming hill on the left bank of the Arno, opposite the Cascine. It is surrounded by an attractive garden with lovely paths, grass plots and magnificent meadows of camellias. It is only 2 stories high, quadrangular in the Italian fashion. An open gallery runs along one side, a sort of loggia with plaster casts of antique statues. Stone steps lead from it down into the garden. From the gallery you enter a bath with a magnificent marble basin, from which winding stairs lead to my mistress' bedchamber. Wanda occupies the 2nd story by herself. A room on the ground floor has been assigned to me. It is very attractive, and even has a fireplace. I have roamed through the garden,